Well, Charles, it's been a leisurely morning, just sitting here doing nothing.
Exactly, for me.
Studio was rebuilt back in New York. We made it home through whatever kind of treacherous
weather and
hurricane was going on. And now it's amazing. I have a feeling we're going to get some drilling outside this window. I don't know why. It seems like the only construction in the apartment building is happening outside of my window.
Perfectly timed, Jason. Not?
Right. So how are you, Charles?
I'm good, Jason. How are you? And
well.
Good to be back. We had a nice excursion down there to Philadelphia, courtesy of you and Larry Klayman. And it might be a fun place to start. We've got a lot to talk about today, but it might be a fun place to start to give some context and explain that I nearly didn't make it to the conference. Yeah. I told you about it.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so just to give
you battles.
Right, exactly. So here we have a collection of nincompoops in government all across the world, but in particularly in the United States, all arguing for more and more power. Give us power. We know how to rule the world. We know how to tell you what to do. And if you want to see an example of what happens when you let a city cede enormous power to a Dummkopf mayor and a dumb shit governor and a collection of people who are even dumber than those two, all you have to do is walk in my shoes through Manhattan.
Yeah.
So I generally do not go out before about 8 o'clock in the morning because oftentimes there's crazy
spillover
people.
Of nuts from the night before.
Yeah. And so, but to get to Penn Station in time to make my 7:17 train, there's no option to count on a taxi. There's no way I'm going to walk. So you're left with the subway. And I walk out my front door and I look up the street, down the street, up the street, and I see these really sketchy looking people, including a prostitute of uncertain, and mind you, this is a very fancy neighborhood. This is not, 42nd Street or whatever, the Bowery. I mean, this is a very fancy part of the city. And I see this younger
kid. Beyond Meat.
Yeah, exactly. Negotiating for some Beyond Meat at 6:15, and that's across the street. And I'm thinking, okay, the Avenue, I'm insulated from this. I'll hightail it into my station, which is Christopher Street, Sheridan Square. And for those of you who don't know the city, I mean, we have really big environmental mandates and expenditures to be sustainable this and sustainable that. And the Environmental Protection Agency is all over emissions and all that kind of stuff.
You're joking, right?
No, we do. We spend the money for it. Whether it actually happens is another question. But the expenditures are certainly made. And a study came out several weeks ago that said that the air quality in this station, Christopher Street, Sheridan Square, is something like 1,000 times worse than bad. I mean, it's not like 1,000 times worse than it should be. It's 1,000 times worse than bad or whatever.
So is that bad?
It's pretty freaking bad. And so I walk down the steps, and I'm just trying to make sure that I avoid any commotion or whatever. I make it through the turnstile, and then I shuffle over to where the attendant is. There is, in this particular uptown side, there's always an attendant, in theory, behind the glass doors. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I made it onto the subway. Maybe the subway will come soon. And then that prostitute comes down the steps and makes this elaborate showing of looking left and looking right and figuring out how to shimmy its way through the turnstile without paying. And so this couple behind the prostitute says, well, why should we pay? And these were, I think, I heard them speaking Spanish. I think they were from Spain. And so what they do is they shimmy through. I'm the sucker who pays. And I watch, 3 fares lost to the MTA system. So I'm about to tap on the door exactly of something like this when I look in, and without getting into the race or gender, this is somebody who, if we care about stopping the spread of disease and comorbidities and stuff like that, probably shouldn't weigh twice as much as a normal weight for somebody. And if you're going to collect a salary, sitting inside this air-conditioned box, probably triple overtime at 6:15 in the morning, you might want to be awake. And this person was just like sound asleep. You could almost hear the person snoring through that. So I make it through, no other gang members, no nothing. The train comes. Fortunately, it's packed with people, actually, which was unusual at 6:15, so I felt safe. Then I get out 34th Street. Now, for people who don't understand 34th Street, what that means in Manhattan, this is a prime station. This is a station where people go out to Long Island, actually out to New Jersey, and also it's the prime Amtrak stop. So it should be a place where if you're going to invest in, quote, infrastructure, you might consider having a place that is devoid of human refuse or whatever, going to the bathroom everywhere, garbage everywhere. And on my way out the station, there were literally not one, not two, but 3 bums, 2 on this wooden couch or whatever, and one guy, and they were just completely out of it, right? But one guy was on the platform on a diagonal with his head just basically ready to be stepped on by the crowd. It was just like oblivious. The guy's right there, and I have to step over his head. And go. So I go through, exit the thing, and then I walk up the stairs because you can go from the subway to Penn Station underground, but you and I have done that and memorialized it actually on a few. And it's very dangerous because people will live in these tunnels. And the first time we went in March of 2020, you recall you were
attacked immediately.
Immediately hit, right? And we had to run out of that place.
Slipped on feces.
I was not going to bring up the brown stuff, but there was a lot of it. Anyway, so I said, I'm not doing that. I walk up the stairs, and your adrenaline, you're wide awake. I mean, I didn't need coffee. Generally, I have 2 cups of coffee in the morning. By the time I got out of the station, I was wide awake. So I walk up the stairs, and there's a big hulking guy blocking the exit to the stairs. And I'm thinking, this is not good because I'm walking up. I've got a roller bag. If he wants to turn around and like, hey, man, give me your money and give me everything, he could push me down the stairs. But he was too distracted checking messages on his Obama phone or whatever the phone was to bother me, which is good news, I thought. So I then come around, I guess it's 7th Avenue, and I'm walking up the street, and I say, wait a minute. It's 6:15, 6:20 in the morning. Why are there fireworks? And I look across the street, and there's a guy with his shirt off firing fireworks up in the air, like firework after firework after firework. And the cars are coming down the avenue. People are walking across traffic, against traffic, without a care in the world. And, you would think that maybe these highly paid police officers who were everywhere might want to do something about it. And at that, we got a donut thing coming in. We got iced coffee coming. We got pensions soon. So I walk by, and there are all these and right there in front of Penn Station. I mean,
it's dangerous there.
The first thing that a tourist would see, if they came in, let's say from Newark
sidewalk hitting their face.
That's right, exactly. So I make it around, and bums everywhere, cops not paying attention. And there literally were 20 to 30 cop vehicles, but nobody thinking it's a good idea to maybe say to the bums, you should stop going out into traffic and stop firing fireworks and stop, defecating on the side of the street. Anyway, so I come around, I say, well, why don't I, for the hell of it, because I bought my ticket there, why don't I go back to the Patrick Moynihan Train Center, which is, when you walk into it, I don't know if you've been in yet.
It's brand new.
It's brand spanking new. And it really is to the level, of construction-wise, and I'm no expert, it seems like a lot of money was spent, no expense was spared, the floors are beautiful, the surfaces are beautiful, everything's new and shiny, and everything seems to be working. And I was walking around looking at it, minding my own business, when this guy comes up to me and he says, where are you going? And I thought, this may not end well. But it turned out he worked for Amtrak. And I said, well, I'm going to Philadelphia. And he said, you don't want to stay here. The escalators don't work in this station. You got to go back across the street to the old station. I'm thinking to myself, what the hell? The place is only a month old. How could the escalators not be working? And so this is just a little vignette to say, the very same team that is saying to us, the world is going to end if we don't spend $93 trillion on a Green New Deal, can't even get a subway renovation, so the subway working properly, and Penn Station working properly, and Amtrak working properly. And, thank God I was alert. Thank God I'm not 85 years old and in a wheelchair or whatever. But it is very, very dangerous in New York City right now to try to do anything. And I bring all this up to say, jokingly, I had no trouble getting down to the conference, but we're sitting here locked in a contest where the rhinos are very happy now to maybe spend $1.2, $1.4 trillion on infrastructure, which, when you get right into it, it's probably, you have to take out the various lines that are included in infrastructure. The amounts of money we're going to pay everybody's mistresses and boyfriends and family members and whatever, let's call that $200 billion. And then,
You sure that's enough?
it may not be. But, and rhinos are not doing anything about it. They're happy to play along. The people on the left are saying, let's pass this bill, $1.4 trillion, and then let's pass another bill. We called it infrastructure before. Why do we call it extra structure or, some other name? And we'll ram that shit through and just pile it all on top of the backs of the children and grandchildren of we the people.
I tell you, Charles, the experience in Penn Station, it's a bit like hooked on phonics. Slipped on feces.
Exactly. Well, there was none of that I noticed anyway.
Not this time around. Now, we had some genius tuning in on Facebook just a moment ago to a show called Charles Ortel is Closing In. And he said, who is this person and why do we care about his daily? And I just said, block.
Well, I can report that on my Twitter, we'll get into this in a second. I think we should first do Philadelphia. But on my Twitter, because there's so much going on with the Clinton Foundation and with the Gates Foundation and with other stuff that we've been talking about, I have noticed a large number of people now following me who have no followers or very few followers, and they're mouthing off on my Twitter feed.
Well, that's obviously, a troll army. We should check and see if any of them are involved with Bot Sentinel.
I don't know.
That's a thing you may recall.
But let's, if we can, stay on. Can we get back to my Twitter feed and do Philadelphia?
This
first?
is your Twitter feed.
No, can we get back to I meant the poster.
Oh,
when I said my Twitter feed, I meant poster.
There you go.
Sorry about that. So at this conference, which you were centrally involved orchestrating and which Larry Klayman sponsored, I reluctantly go to conferences because I don't really like to go to crowds and I don't like to sit listening to people for hours and hours and whatever. But I have to say this conference was very well done, and hats off to you and to Larry for doing it. It was the premise of the conference, of course, was that we've reached a point in the evolution of this country where perhaps we need to have another Continental Congress. Now, one thing that was, I just want to give some perspective and then maybe constructive criticism and context of the thing. One thing that Larry and the group didn't make clear enough in my mind is that the way this thing worked is you had the Declaration of Independence first, and then the Revolutionary War ensued, and then people came together, and we always skip over the Articles of Confederation period. So the first thing that happened was not that they signed the Constitution. The first thing they tried was something called the Articles of Confederation, and it didn't freaking work.
What do you mean? What did it do?
Well, the people were very suspicious. The delegates and the country, the revolutionaries were very suspicious, having been through tyrannical power in the hands of the executive, the king. They didn't want to give the executive branch the type of power that you need to run the country. This is like a summary analysis of what happened. I'm no historian. But so they crafted the Articles of Confederation in a way that made, in effect, the Speaker of the House the president of the country, and greatly curtailed that person's power. I think it was only a one-year term or whatever, and they didn't have a strong central bank. There were all sorts of problems.
But aren't central banks bad, Charles?
I don't think so.
But a lot of people do. The Fed is bad.
The Fed may or may not be bad, but they didn't have, they had chaos. They didn't have confidence in the currency. They didn't have, the executive couldn't, it was so hobbled by the way it was set up that they then had to come in and create the Constitution, which was an improvement upon the Articles of Confederation. Okay,
no,
what?
Well, this guy's got some. We might start hearing drilling. Sorry,
right? He's just waiting until we're going to get into the part of it.
People can see him out the window there.
That's right. Hi there. Anyway, so the reason that's important in my mind is that there is a precedent for sitting there in this country and saying, okay, we tried the Articles of Confederation and they didn't work so well. What's wrong?
This guy's there's a construction crew out there. Sorry. Please continue.
It's okay. We tried the Articles of Confederation and it didn't work, so we need to come back together. Now let's try the Constitution. And we've tried the Constitution for a long period of time. And what people, even some of the people who were talking at that convention, didn't stress enough is that the founders, for example, were deeply suspicious. In fact, they barred, by constitutional provision, they barred the imposition of an income tax because they knew that would eventually get to where we are today.
Weaponized.
Right. So a lot of the other provisions in the Constitution make sense when you say there isn't an income tax. When you put the income tax in, then you need to change more than just the question of the income tax. And so I would argue that some of the edits, the amendments, were not carefully thought through enough. You have to go back to the very beginning of the Constitution and say, what were people trying to do there? What they were trying to do is they were trying to give as much power to the reserve power to the people of the country. They did not want to set something up so that we would be governed by bureaucrats. There were all sorts of steps that were put in place to make sure that the people who served in the House and the Senate, for example, were part-time people.
With other jobs, right?
They had other jobs on their farms. Typically, it was an agrarian
Instead
economy.
of these professional grifters that we have now.
Right. And indeed, in 1789, I forget exactly when Washington, D.C. became a thing, but I'm pretty certain that it wasn't until after 1789 that we began to have the structures and buildings and everything else in Washington, D.C. that we today sadly have. So, founded on July 16th. So it wasn't, 1789 was when the Constitution was signed. So it wasn't even a thing yet. And
no city there at all? It was a swamp, wasn't it?
It still is.
Yeah, but you got to drain it.
Exactly. And
why did they choose a swamp to put a city on? That seems stupid.
Who knows? I wasn't there. I know I'm old, but I wasn't.
Easy access for the swamp creatures to get to work, I guess.
Well, it was an elaborate compromise, remember? There's a big compromise between the North and the South, and where should the capital be, et cetera. Anyway, so I think that's one important thing to remember, that there is already a precedent, and much more time has passed than between 1782 and 1789, obviously. The Articles of Confederation experiment was 7 years. The constitutional experiment is quite long indeed.
Still happening, isn't it?
Still happening, and I think we can safely say that the income tax approach really doesn't work well, because no matter what you say, I mean, the facts are, I know facts don't matter to the left, but the facts are that the overwhelming percentage of taxes
stolen
is paid for by the rich. You can't debate that. I mean, it's just there. The math is there. Overwhelming percentage of all taxes paid are paid by the richest among us.
But not corporations, though.
The corporations don't pay. First of all, the idea that corporations pay taxes is bullshit. Corporations charge whatever tax, if they can, they attempt to charge whatever taxes that are assessed to them to the ultimate customers, which are people, inevitably. You can say other corporations buy from corporations, but inevitably, go up the food chain, the shareholders of the corporation are individuals, and so when you place a tax on a corporation, all you're doing is pretending that you're not taxing yourselves, but you're taxing yourselves. And even forgetting all that,
because they just raise the prices.
They
for their
attempt
stuff.
to raise the prices, and if they can, the customer pays for it. So it's corporate taxes on the one hand are not really paid by corporations, and on the other hand, they're a small percentage of the total tax burden. They're tiny. They're $200-300 billion. It's compared to the total amount that government spends is not what they collect, obviously, because we're running these gigantic deficits. And that's just thinking about revenues and expenses. When you think about capital expenditures, we might be collecting taxes of $4 trillion, but we're spending $7 trillion or $8 trillion. And that's before you think through what the Federal Reserve is borrowing to purchase assets, which may or may not ever work out in the long run. So some of this reverence for the founders and reverence for the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was just that. It was a declaration. It was a statement of intent. It had, I suppose, at the time, legal force and effect, in theory, maybe, but it's not like the Constitution, which is a governing document of this country. You okay?
Yeah.
So I think that's one important thing to make sure. So when we have the people like AOC and others run around the country saying that you have an absolute right to life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness as
other
enshrined in
people's
the
money.
Constitution. Now, so you might have that right as enshrined in Dr. Seuss in the nursery rhyme, but you don't have it as a legal right.
What do you mean?
To pursue happiness? I mean, that's a goal expressed in the Declaration of Independence. Declaration is not a binding document on we the people. It's just a bunch of people got together, signed it. It was an actual fact at the time illegal under English law. There was no such thing as American law until you fought the Revolution, won, and installed first the Articles of Confederation and then the Constitution. So in my mind, again, not being a lawyer, in my mind, the Declaration is a noble document. It's a brilliant document. In fact, it is not
It's more of a letter of intent.
a statement of purpose. It's
Mission statement.
It's like a whereas portion of a proclamation. Whereas this or whereas that, and if we win, maybe we get away with this. But and also to the point, one thing that I found as kind of an amateur student, or as an amateur student of history, we in this country are fond of saying that history begins in either 1492 if you want to go back to Columbus, 1607 if you want to go to Jamestown, 1920 if you want to go to the Mayflower. But all of our legal principles and much of our history rests on experience in England and what is now the United Kingdom, draws on experience in France and Germany and elsewhere. But certainly when it comes to law, is based on first English law and before that Roman law. So you really, to understand what these people were driving at, what they were railing against in 1776 and hoping to improve thereafter, you've got to have more of an understanding of English history. And that is not taught at any of the good places I went. So I suspect it's probably not taught very well elsewhere.
Well, it was interesting that one constitutional lawyer, I'm forgetting his name right now, but he said that he was surprised that when he went to law school, they never told him to read the Constitution. It was just interpretations of what other people thought of the Constitution.
Well, I'm talking about prior to the Constitution. I'm talking about, for example,
Right.
Most people don't understand that we don't have to go back to Henry VIII and before that, but in the period where King James, and then King Charles, this is the early 1600s. King Charles was not somebody you want to shake your head and think of me, because he lost.
Name, I'm saying.
Well, he lost weight the hard way, starting with his head from his neck up. But Charles's father James was somebody who was very much of the divine right. Kings are absolute; they know what they're doing. Don't challenge me. And so there was the nobles and the population began to get more and more upset, first with James and then with Charles. And I think there was a document issued called the Petition of Right, which I think was in 1628. I may have that wrong. Again, it's from my amateur study. Yeah, 1628. And this recites protections against the state.
Wait a minute. This looks like the Rothschild's crest of arms.
Well,
look, it has the unicorn and the lion.
Well, I don't know anything about that, but
that's in Untermeyer Park.
Okay. Well, let's.
Sorry.
If we go back to the Magna Carta, people don't seem to understand that the protections that were demanded in the Petition of Right go back to the Magna Carta, which in turn goes back to another document in 1100 and another document. There's been a centuries-long struggle between people who thirst for power to tell you what you may or may not do, and people who thirst for the liberty to spend the precious seconds, hours, days, months, and years that we have on the planet acting responsibly and enjoying life. And it's a constant battle. And what Jefferson was articulating and others in the Declaration of Independence echoed demands that were made on June 7, 1628. But the point is that you go back to June 7, 1628, ultimately what happened is that the people rose up, and some would argue illegally, put King Charles I to death in 1649, and we were in a happy place. AOC's great theoretical ancestor was there to say, great, we could now spend £1 million on the first green. But anyway, the people ran riot in 1649. And what happened, the short version of it, is what happened in that period where there was a republic in England from 1649 to 1660 odd, was it became tyranny.
Yeah.
And the folks who had settled in America and risen to the top of the food chain by 1776 had ancestors that participated in that experience. They had family memories of how this doesn't work. And above all, they actually read history, which is a useful thing to do. And they believed that math wasn't racist. So they understood that 1 + 1 = 2, and they were commonsensical. They understood that it's not all about us today, that what we do today sets a precedent for tomorrow. And
no section of the Magna Carta on pronouns.
No section on pronouns. And the Magna Carta is taught, it's always taught as this is a fantastic victory for the nobles. They held the king to account. When in actual fact, what happened is the king said, "Oh yeah, I'll sign your Magna Carta." No problem. I'll sign it. And then he just rounded up a bunch of the guys and had him executed after the fact.
Wow.
So and that happened as well with in 1649, James II had to flee the country, and it was really shocking, even for the English, to believe that you could kill a king, put the king on trial. I mean, that was unheard of.
Right, they're
concept.
supposed to be divine, right?
Right, and so and the king. This is maybe I get my stubbornness from. I'm not related to King Charles I, but I am stubborn. King Charles I's attitude to this was, trial. Fuck you. I'm not going to sit down for a trial. I'm not going to defend myself. This is not something that.
How did
happening.
They kill him? I mean, doesn't
They
the
cut
king
his head
have an
off.
army and everything?
Well, they had so co-opted the nobles, and there were people who were all for it, and then they chopped his head off.
That's wild.
And so the kids and the people around the kid, who then was asked to come back as king, he kept a list of names. And the second he was reinstalled, and perhaps before that he was reinstalled or installed as a monarch, in I think 1662 or thereabouts, thereafter, teams of people working for the king came to this country and hunted down the judges and supporters who had put his father to death. Now, another thing to point out, which
how come I've never heard any of this before?
I'm saying I only found out about this 10 years ago.
Wow.
It's really a rich history, actually, to go back and open it up and say, wait a minute, there's a precedent here for what's going on. Another thing that people don't understand, and indeed folks made a mistake, and I was not going to criticize the people in the conference. They said that, for example, Thomas Jefferson would be a millionaire. Well, in fact, Thomas Jefferson, at his death, was bankrupt.
Well, so what? Seems like a lot of millionaires are bankrupt today.
Well, but my point is, so the way it worked under the king for a long period of time, and the way I don't know that it still works this way in the United Kingdom, but back then certainly, most land was held by the king. And even if you're a duke, which is one of the highest possible nobles, even if you're a duke, your lands are probably not freehold. And meaning that the king you would go decide you were going to marry, and the king would have veto rights often on who you married to make sure that...
What?
Well, he was trying to protect the kingdom, or the queen. So they didn't want to see some upstart, Meghan Markle come in and mess up the next king of England. So they would be very careful about who, this is like drunk history here, or not drunk, but very quick history.
We should do that.
Yeah, we could do that. But anyway, so they were very cautious about that. And what would happen is you'd go to the king, or people would go to the king for the approval of the marriage.
Wow.
And then they'd get married. And then the king would, if, let's say, the heir to the throne, his parents both died, the king would have control of the heir. And the king would decide how a title to the property would then pass when the heir became of legal age. And more to the point, all of these people, their properties were not like your property here is held freehold in your name. Over there, even George Washington, perhaps depending on where his lands were, or Jefferson, depending where they were, in then Virginia, if they're on the king's portion of Virginia, then those lands were technically the property of the king, and you had a use right for your life and maybe one or two lifetimes thereafter to use that property. But the king would decide how that property passed. So when they say, yeah, as they did, when those people signed that document, which was in gross violation, it wasn't just in violation of English law, it was an abomination as far as English law was concerned. You're taking on the king. Had they lost, the penalty back then is far worse than death.
Oh, right.
Far worse than
everything.
death. It's, first of all, there's no good way to be executed, but this is not politically correct. What they would do is they would put you up and on a noose, hang you, but not close to death. They let you get close, but not all the way home.
Wow.
So you're thinking, kill me, man. This is no, that's not what we're going to do yet. Then they put you behind carriages,
drawn and quartered,
and drag you through the streets of England. Now you think 34th Street and 7th Avenue is bad.
Yeah.
That's nothing compared to what England was like back in 1770.
No toilets. They would just dump it out the street.
There's cobblestones everywhere.
It's like Penn
uneven.
Station.
There's garbage. There's all kinds of stuff. There's rats. There's pestilence and all kinds. So you've been nearly killed by hanging. Now you're being dragged not for like a block, for 2 miles or something, and then to complete your day, they cut you into quarters, into 4 pieces. And
no, I thought they'd use 4 horses to pull you apart.
Right, but they turn you into 4 pieces, and then they cut your head off, and then to warn everybody that you better not do this, they put your head on a pike on the outskirts of London.
They need a warning after all that?
Exactly.
It's like, man, I'm still thinking about it.
And then on top of that, all of your children could never have property.
Wow.
So I mean, it's under Christianity, I don't know Judaism, but under Christianity, if you destroy the body in that way, you have no hope of going to heaven. So I mean, it was cruel and unusual punishment.
That's why they put that in the Constitution.
Well, yeah, and you were back then. I don't know the specifics. I may have it slightly off, but if you stole a loaf of bread, you could be killed.
Chop the hand. Killed for bread?
Yeah, I know. And there was a school of thought back then that humans were so evil, diabolical, conniving, that unless you made the penalties really, really stark, people would just go ahead and do this stuff. And even then, people still did that stuff. So in the context, what those people did, and most of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence had substantial assets, in theory, on paper.
That's somebody getting drawn and quartered. Why do they bother with the underwear?
It was free.
That's not going to stay on.
Dragging
them through the street. Wait, stop! My briefs.
So stop the poop from coming out all over the
Oh,
crowd.
this guy's about to chop him. Look at that.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
Nice
and
picture.
Everyone's participating here.
Oh yeah, it was like it was a thing to watch. Yeah, there was no Sunday with Charles. I mean, you go out and you watch this.
Wow.
So within the context, this was quite something. What happened? There was a lot at risk. The French helped us out enormously. Helped the Americans out, winning that war. We do owe a debt of gratitude to the French for that initial period. And the other thing to understand is that back then, it was an agrarian society, principally an agrarian society. And I don't know how much time...
No Beyond Meat in 17...
F that. But beyond that, I don't know how much time, if you've ever spent, let's say, a year or more living in the country.
Well, what country?
In the rural portion of this country.
No.
No, right. So when you move out of Los Angeles, you move out of New York, and you live in the heartland, you quickly come to understand, particularly if you have children, and if you're living in the Northeast or
survival.
In a portion of the country where there's 4 seasons, what you come to understand is that nature is very powerful and very fickle. So if you're out there as somebody supporting your family off a farm, not only do you have to worry about the wolves coming and eating your chickens, but you got to worry about the 100-year flood and the 50-year snowstorm.
No government bailouts either.
And no government bailouts, and no SNAP cards, and no nothing. And you got no electricity as well. So you're sitting there at night, and it's not like you flop on the couch and turn on Tucker Carlson and watch whatever.
Or turn on the lights. If you slept through the alarm, that's it.
Right, and farm life was what it is like now. The animals don't say, I'd like a wake-up call at 9:30. Right. You've had too much mead. Fine, I'll wait to crap all over the barn until after you show up at 9:30. I mean, you're out there at 5 o'clock in the morning taking care of those animals, and you have a healthy respect for forces that are more powerful than humans, which is something, and there are a lot of quotes in history of this period and afterwards, that we who live in cities can easily get into a place, and I was raised in a city and had more experience now living outside the city, but I'm hardly a country person. We could come to believe that, nature, who cares about that? The snowplows will deal with that.
Right.
We've got takeout food and come in here, and I've got stuff stored away in the refrigerator, and I can watch Sunday with Charles or something else. Not so back then. So to be, for example, as educated as these people were, you could read by candlelight, but I don't know if you've ever tried to do that. It's not very easy.
And the glasses probably were hard to come by if you couldn't see that well.
Right, and so some of these accomplishments of the people, Jefferson in particular, who wrote the Declaration of Independence at a very young age. Before writing that, I think he wrote I think he did write the statement of something to do with religious freedom in Virginia. I think he authored that prior to the Declaration of Independence. So to have the kind of book learning that he had, with no ability to read at night, to know all, and many of these people had to be able to read these classic books in the original English, no audible, but to read it Jefferson knew ancient Greek and Latin and Italian and Spanish and French and German and this and Hebrew and all these other things. And many of them as well had a perspective on history, which after all is kind of conceited to say, forget all the past. I AOC because I know how to mix a mean daiquiri. And can whip up some guacamole for you on the side.
On TikTok,
I'm the person who's going to design a $93 trillion infrastructure deal. Forget all the lessons of history. I mean, this is sort of the opposite. That slavery, for example, which is not a good thing. No one is going to try to argue that slavery is a good thing. But slavery has been part of the human condition for as long as there have been humans. And I can make an argument, I hope a compelling argument, that with regard to political slavery, that doesn't exist, I don't think, in the United States. And if it does, it's
called Twitter.
Well, if it does exist, it's in a small portion of the country. There are people who hold other people as slaves, and that's horrible, but it's not an institution in the United States of America. It is an institution in Libya. Thank you, Hillary.
Now it is, yeah.
Thanks, Obama. Thank you, John Kerry.
Well, now that you bring that up, Charles, there was a big deal being made when Biden was meeting with Putin, but nobody really said anything about the fact that he had met with Erdogan days before, and Erdogan has basically taken up the mantle of continuing to destroy Libya since 2011.
Right. So just if we can, going back into this great conference, the first thing I would say is that some of that context about why the founders were there and what they were up against, the fact that it wasn't just that conditions were untenable, taxation without representation, that this is a long experiment, a long battle between power-hungry people and liberty-seeking people. And until 1776, maybe long ago, thousands of years ago, maybe there was a period where one cave dweller was free to hit another cave dweller on the head, and that was life, but we don't know anything of that history. The struggle that erupted and was part of our experiment here in the United States in 1776 is a long struggle. The next thing, I wasn't told to give any context. I was told just to talk about the Clinton Foundation in my piece. But when we summarize what some of these speakers were talking about, a lot of what the African American speakers were talking about and some of the other speakers were talking about is the thirst or the thirst for economic equality or justice or opportunity or whatever. And I really think, I remember in the schools I went to, we never, even at Harvard Business School, we never had a home economics course or a how you live your life course. And I really think that should be taught by 6th grade. I mean, you should be teaching people that the basics of how you
like
live.
Baking cookies and sewing puppets in my high school, home
Right.
economics.
No, I'm talking about the various, people always talk about how do you get to be rich. I mean, one way is the John Kerry method. You marry a rich woman.
Oh.
You marry a rich woman. That's one, or a rich person.
I've not had any luck with that
Yet.
strategy.
Jury's out on that one, Jason. Never knows. Lightning can strike. But anyway, that's one way. But seriously speaking, you learn, and I think actually in the Jewish tradition with bar mitzvahs, you do get money at a younger age, at 14 or 13 or whatever. 13. And so you become exposed to, hey, I've got this money, and chances are your parents don't.
Got socked away.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but that's not the way it would necessarily work,
for
if everybody got that
That
money.
was a smart thing to do, because if you're 13, you're going to spend it on Legos or something.
Right, but what I'm saying is that's when you give money to a 13-year-old, right? I mean, or allow somebody to have money at age 13, that person in the United States is going to live to be 78, 80 years old. That's a large time period.
To invest it, you mean?
Right. What I'm saying is the life expectancy is whatever it is. If you're white, it's one thing. If you're Asian, it's another thing. If you're Hispanic, if you're black, whatever it is, the number is. It's a big number compared to 13. And what I say, educating people about money, if you educate them about the time value of money, which is the longer that you invest money, the more, in theory, if you take no risk, no real risk, equity risk, that money is going to grow and grow and grow. And by the magic of compounding, reinvesting interest on interest, if you just invest in treasury securities, which isn't a good idea, but if you did it with a 13-year-old kid and just said, don't touch that until you're 70,
College. Oh, wow.
that pile of money is going to be worth a lot of money. So that's one lesson that should be taught, particularly at that tender age, 13. When I know the way I was thinking, it's like, I want that now.
Right.
And you say, no, you don't want it now. This is money you couldn't possibly spend anyway. And if we put it aside, by the time your children are 13, this pile that you have...
Pay for their bar mitzvah. It's a cycle that just...
It'll pay my taxes, my estate tax, whatever. No, but the point being, that lesson, and the very simple lesson of if you want to be rich legitimately, there's a very simple way to get there. If you learn this lesson when you're 13, well, no, not working hard is not enough. But people work hard
and don't get rich,
and they work themselves into the grave.
Right.
And the most important lesson I told you, this friend of mine told my daughter when she was less than 13, is when you get that first paycheck, look at it carefully, and understand how much the government is taking out of your paycheck. Get that through your head right away. You're a 12-year-old actress or whatever, and you get your first check, and holy shit, they're taking out like 25% of the check. How come I didn't get the whole check? I was just talking actually to my father about this, who's almost 95, and he went into the family business as I think he was a delivery boy or something like that in this office supply printing company out in the West Coast, and I think he was making 25 cents an hour or whatever, like a small amount of money, and he expected to get, call it $10. And he was like, rip shit that they at like age 10 or 11 or 12. So you learn that.
Isn't that illegal to be 10 and
whatever the age was? It was a long time ago. Yeah. And so you get that first paycheck, and the first thing you need to learn is that you pay yourself first out of that paycheck. By that I mean, if you get $10 after tax, before you go spend it at the candy store, you take a percentage of that, 10%, 20, 30, 50, depending on how much, and you invest it. You start doing that when you're 13, 10, 12, 13. You get into that discipline. You have the magic of compounding on your side, and you learn that it's not about going down to the car dealership because you want a Cadillac, and General Motors is dumb enough to lend you the money or more than the money to buy the Cadillac. you don't do it that way. You get from a very young age, spend less than you earn and invest the balance in stuff that will grow for the long term. That's really the essence of capitalism, that you get into that discipline, that you're out there, a large collection of people are all trying to do that. They're trying to find a good way to be productive and make money. They're spending less than they earn. They're saving. And then with the savings, they're going out and they're stress testing the companies that they could invest in and the governments that they could buy bonds in. They're saying, we want you to play by the rules and really report honestly on your progress and prospects. If you have problems, tell us about it. And so a key portion of this whole capitalist thing is that big companies that are in the capital markets behave responsibly. And the reason I bring all this stuff up is that explains why I went after GE in the beginning. I went after GE because it was a gigantic company. Everybody thought it was a fantastic company. A lot of people's livelihoods depended on GE. I get emails today from people who were working in GE who are really upset that they didn't sell their stock a long time ago, who are pissed at the management.
Yeah.
And they should be. And indeed, when you have these people, that Jack Welch, who's still dead, so we can't do anything about that.
They got the money.
Well, and Jeff Immelt, he took the money, another CEO and another CEO. Recently, the current CEO, his pay package, he was asked for this ridiculous pay package that if things worked, and it was turned down, interestingly, by the shareholders, which is a good thing. So I went after GE initially just because I was pissed at seeing what I saw, that it's absurd how
H. Lawrence culpable.
We can get into him in a second. But going into GE back in 2001 and then 7 and 8, I just looked at these collection of executives and banks and investment managers and people who were making money off of GE, and I looked into the underlying performance of GE, and I was shocked at what I saw. And initially I thought I was crazy that I thought GE was a fraud, but
Blofeld is running it.
Exactly, he's still dead, thankfully.
He looks horrible.
Yeah, he was a horrible human being, frankly. And so I made an example of them, and I think that example is, people are still looking at it. Somebody just sent me something that GE in the UK, which maybe
Colin sent that.
Right, exactly. I don't know if that there is another General Electric company in the UK, and I don't know if that's this part of the main one or the different one, but GE today is it's accepted wisdom that it's a mess. And again, I'm not tooting my own horn, just reciting facts. When I suggested that you get out of GE or really bet against it, the stock was at 40. And if you look today, it's probably 13, 14. What should be 33?
Yeah. Well, it was down to like 6 or 7.
666.
Is that his daughter?
That's his third wife.
Oh my God! Come on, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Actually, I think you could check the title. Before I get into this story.
Dead at 84.
Yeah. That's Maria Bartiromo,
yeah.
I think. But who actually was very nice to me on CNBC. She encouraged me to come.
Oh, look who it is here.
Yeah. She encouraged me to come on and express my negative views about GE on a GE-owned channel, CNBC, which I did many times.
Wow. And now she works for Fox, and here's this dope standing with Welch.
Right. So back, just to reprise this in a second, because we're going to drift from here into the charity land. This, I believe, is Susie Welch, who was editor of the Harvard Business Review, and Jack Welch was Jack Welch was CEO, was the outgoing CEO, and the editor of the Harvard Business Review volunteered for the job of doing an article for the Harvard. The Harvard Business Review is taken reasonably seriously around the world, and she was the editor of it, and she volunteered for the job of interviewing Jack Welch on his way out the door, and decided that the best way to interview him was to take his clothes off.
That is just horrible. I mean, the guy looks.
But she nundeless, she had sex with a guy, and
stop saying
and
it.
he had sex with her, unlike Bill Clinton. And she and the Harvard Business Review published this glowing tribute to Jack Welch. I mean, that to me is disgusting. In fact, when I was making my push against GE, I remembered that when I was at Harvard Business School, and before then, there was a long tradition in the past that the dean of Harvard Business School was not by right, but by custom, was on the board of GE. And a lot of the cases that we were taught at Harvard Business School were all about Jack Welch is a genius, and this GE Capital is amazing, and all the different virtues of GE and the management things you can learn from GE and all this kind of stuff. So I called up this friend of mine from college. I'm not going to identify who he is, but he was a full professor at Harvard Business School. And I said, listen, here's the situation that I see. And I talked him through it. And he said, Charles, can I come to New York now and see you and talk about this? And he got on a plane and we had dinner and we went through some considerable length and I talked to him about it. And I said, would you have a problem? I mean, exposing this, given the closeness that GE has had with Harvard Business School. And he said, are you kidding me? After what Susie Welch, did to the reputation of the Harvard Business Review?
Because she's like a little harlot.
Well, you can't do that. I would hope that even in the mainstream media, which is in several notches below Harvard Business School, Harvard Business Review. The Harvard Business Review is supposed to have high and mighty peer-reviewed articles about management strategy, and you could say that getting a master's in business administration and a doctorate is bullshit, which maybe I would agree with you. It's not like getting a medical doctorate degree. It's not like getting a PhD in nuclear physics
Don't you
or chemistry.
have one?
Not in nuclear physics.
Oh no, but I mean in
I'm just saying I got an MBA because at the time I had nothing better to do, and I got into Harvard Business School at age 22, and I thought, what the hell? If I can get an MBA by the time I'm 24, maybe I'll get a good job.
Don't their nose, teeth, and chins look remarkably similar? The teeth look expensive on this guy.
On both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hair on her.
I'm very interested in these so-called married couples that look super identical to one another. There's something weird going on here, but I know you don't like it when I talk about speculative stuff like that.
I'm just trying to go through the train of thinking. So when Armstrong Williams talked about the need for economic justice and people were making fun of Alan Keyes was making fun of the guy who created Black Entertainment Network for wanting reparations.
Right.
The simple fact is that if we got all of our young people, not simply African Americans or Hispanic Americans or other minorities, but everybody understanding the basics of how you run a household, that you try to spend less than you earn and save the balance and put it wisely in articles that will hold or increase their value over the long term. That's the simple piece of my simple view on capitalism. Contrast capitalism with what we're taught now, which is crapitalism.
Theftism.
Crapitalism. It's total crap. We have a country where very few people, if you think honestly, perhaps, and I'm not asking you to make a comment, but perhaps your parents have a financial net worth, i.e. they have financial assets greater than the mortgage on their house. A lot of people, when they talk about having a net worth, they have a net worth, but they have a mortgage. And so they have a property worth $2 million and a mortgage of $1 million and a net worth of $1 million, but they might have another $100,000 in capital. I'm just talking, like fly specking it. Most Americans, 80%,
don't have any of that.
They don't have $500.
Yeah.
Right? So to say that if we have problems with the system, the reason we have problems is it's capitalism. This isn't a capitalist country. It's crapitalism. We're sitting here, we're teaching people that it's a good idea to borrow much more than you earn every year.
Every month.
Every year. And that's what our government does. I mentioned to you John Cullen's excellent presentation at this conference. He talked about the disposition of $4 trillion in tax revenue, and he pointed out that 51% of it came from individuals, and he didn't mention that 34%, at least we didn't focus on, that 34% came from payroll taxes. So really 85% of the tax revenues collected in the period he was looking at were from, in effect, individuals, directly and indirectly. But that ignores the fact that, I forget the year, but let's just posit that in the year he was talking about, total spending was $7 trillion. So in other words, you're caring about the $4 trillion that you collected, but you're running up another bill of $3 trillion that's got to be paid down eventually. And you start spending $3 trillion a year, all you can collect is $4 trillion in tax revenue. You've got a problem, right? A serious problem. So this situation that we're in here, where a vocal minority is saying we've got to give economic we've got to reparations for the sins of slavery going way back. We got to do a lot more than that. I mean, we've got to wean the government, state, local, federal government, off the idea that you can every year spend a lot more money than you take in.
Yeah.
We've been doing that since 1981 in this country.
It was Ronald Reagan, right? Deficit spending.
Well, we did it beforehand, but in size, really starting with Ronald Reagan in 81, the only year from 81 to the present where we've had a surplus.
Bill Clinton.
1 year only, 2000. 1 year, and it was less than $100 billion, right? And so,
frankly, if it was $100, we'd be better off right now.
Right, but my point is that, you know, we are wedded to, and Barack Obama warned us. He said he is going to fundamentally transform this country.
Yes.
So he wasn't the first to engage in big deficit spending. A lot of Democrats criticized Reagan for the deficit spending, and then Democrats criticized correctly George W. Bush for the deficit spending. But where it went completely off the rails was under Obama. And to capstone the Obama years, we have the 8 years where the deficits were monumental. We have Donald Trump trying to make headway for a time, but then with the pandemic, we're now on a course here. Who knows how much the deficit is going to rise in this year? We just have no idea.
I think it's going to be a huge amount. They're just doling out money.
Right. So when we look at this, Larry had another thing that we didn't talk enough about is Larry had this thing about ending the scandal industry or something like that up on the page.
His book is It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry.
Right. And there is an argument, and it's funny, somebody mentioned Carroll Quigley.
Oh, yeah.
And I decided to look Carroll Quigley up, and it's interesting that his book on the Anglo-American establishment was published after his death in 1981, but was written in 1949.
Huh.
And
Why published after his death? This was the one that was brought up at the conference, I think.
Weapon systems
and political stability, about the Second Amendment or something?
This could be a different Carroll Quigley.
Really?
No, I guess not. This is here. It says died January 5th, 1977. You look him up in Wikipedia. You'll see what I'm talking about. With 2 L's.
Oops. Well, that's why.
There you go. You got to.
Google has spell check. Okay.
And look at his works. Notable work, Tragedy and Hope, that must be the weapon system. And then the Anglo-American Establishment, published in 81, after his death. Died on my brother's birthday,
look,
January 3rd.
You can read it online.
There you go.
Hey, what's going on here?
But this is a whole book about how elements in Skull and Bones and...
I got to read that.
I'm telling you, this is why I'm bringing it up, Jason.
But wait a minute, look at this. The logo for the books in focus is very Eye of Horus-ish.
So this is an interesting book, and I suspect that if I have the time and energy to go back into this, I suspect that the project to distract the American people and preserve opportunity for the English people is a project that goes way, way back in time. And in particular, if we focus on World War II to the present, the project to get the United States to enter World War II on behalf of the Allies was delayed, and we reluctantly got into it. And I would guess that just as we may have been tricked into entering the war on false pretenses, I think we did it for the correct reasons in World War II, but we may well have been tricked under false pretenses. And it may well have been the case that we knew about Pearl Harbor before it attacked and didn't do enough, et cetera. If we were to go back over that history and think through the number of times that Americans and others have been tricked to engage in grand projects that supposedly are going to benefit the world, this would again explain why we haven't yet encountered any aliens, because there have been so many times when dastardly decisions have been made, despicable decisions have been made, pulling the wool over ordinary people's eyes to engage in projects that benefit the insiders, and make the rest of us poorer and poorer by piling on these debts on all our countries and never explaining who screwed up. And
How do you like that, Charles?
hearts and minds, winning the working
Well, the
class vote.
Fabian Society, I mean, the reason I bring it up is because I find it to be remarkably similar to the Dominion voting logo. And, of course, world-famous crackhead pillow salesman said, "You're working for Dominion, you're working for Dominion," and then he hung up the phone.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think this is a whole hot mess over there. But along the lines of what you were talking about this long-standing plan to recapture the colonies and take over America, I was reading something about how Cecil Rhodes and the Fabian Society, going back to 1902, they both had like 100-year plans. I mean, the Fabian Society is considered a think tank.
Right.
I think it was you who told me, or maybe David
Wasn't
Hawkins. Yeah, that it's rooted in the London School of Economics, but that dope Dennis, whatever his name is, was loving the London School of Economics.
Dennis Chang, yeah.
And look at this. Their crest, coat of arms, whatever you want to call it, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah. Yeah. But just if we can, staying a little bit on Carroll Quigley and Clinton, in the discussion about Bill Clinton, about Carroll Quigley, when it talks about, in Wikipedia, it mentions, there's a section on influence on Bill Clinton.
Oh, really?
Yeah, influence number 2.
Oh, wow.
And it's revealing to somebody like me who remembers what it was like to try to become a Rhodes Scholar, because I tried to and failed. And here
Tried to become a Rhodes Scholar?
Sure, yeah.
Why did you fail to do that?
Because my grades weren't good enough, and which is why you're a great straight man. Because look at in his freshman year, he took Quigley's course, receiving a B as his final grade in both semesters. Okay, I had a B average my freshman year, and an A average.
So how did he get in? I think you might have been denied for other reasons.
Well, probably. But my point is, back in '65, I entered Yale 9 years after that. In '74, it wasn't quite as tight as it was back when he went to be a Rhodes Scholar. You had to have, in theory, very high grades, and you also
most
had,
people got a D.
That doesn't matter. You had to get, because you're being graded. They don't say, well, let's understand the particulars of Georgetown. It's like at Yale, we have somebody over here who got 36 A's. At Georgetown, we got this guy from Arkansas who got 2 B's in freshman year. That's not good enough. So you have to look and say, you could say that a B is a good grade in Georgetown, but you can say whatever you want. Doesn't matter. And more important, back then, you had to be a scholar athlete in theory. So what was Bill's athletic event, chasing co-eds around, chasing girls down the street?
Being able to have sex while on cocaine, perhaps, was his sport.
I don't know. But you see here, in 1991, he said that Quigley was very important. And remember, this book wasn't published.
When did he die?
1977, Carroll Quigley died. So I think it'll be worthwhile, and I bet you there's a fair amount written. Back
Lee
then,
Stranahan knows about Carroll Quigley.
I'm just saying, but in addition to what he knows, there could be evidence that we haven't looked at yet. And all I'm saying is, I hadn't read this until this morning, that for Bill to have gotten 2 B's freshman year, and who knows what his other grades were like, but then to have gotten a Rhodes Scholarship, the way it worked is that senators, I believe, had influence in the Rhodes process. So the Rhodes Scholarship is a scholarship. And I think there's a Rhodes Trust that takes care of. Then there's the Marshall Scholarship, which is something that I believe the English gave in gratitude to the Marshall Plan. But politicians have influence over this process. So here's this Bill Clinton character who goes to Georgetown, which that decision, for me, I don't understand why a Baptist, if he was a Baptist, but Arkansas is principally Baptist, why a Baptist would have gone to a Catholic school. That's a little bit unusual. I say that as the grandson of a Baptist minister who has all kinds of, on my mother's side, family history about the relations between the Catholic Church and the Baptist Church. Not good.
Well, this might be my non sequitur brain putting unrelated things together, but this round table movement, I think, is what they were talking about as being competing things that wanted to. This says it was an association of organizations promoting a closer union, but I think it was about recapturing the colonies. It strikes me because it reminds me of the Business Roundtable, which Jan Weinberg told me about, and that doesn't seem like a good thing. But actually, also, because of this 1909, and weirdly, just the other day, I was speaking to somebody about the whole George Floyd killing and that building that was destroyed, which was the Odd Fellows. That was built in 1909. Probably just a coincidence, but
right.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that there are long-standing mysterious ties among elements in the United States and elements in the United Kingdom and elements in the Commonwealth. There's indeed, if you really want to get into it, there's a mystery as to what happened when the Knights Templar were disbanded, what happened to that enormous wealth that they had, where did that go? And there's a theory that it went up to Canada somewhere. I mean, you go on into this.
That roundtable thing said that Canada was going to be pivotal to recapturing the colonies, and then now Justin Timberlake, or whatever the hell his name is tap dancing around Parliament instead of telling us what happened to that scientist that the RCMP kicked out in July of 2019, who was going to Wuhan with samples of stuff.
But staying on this conference here in Philadelphia, if I may.
Sure.
It was really interesting to see listen to and interact with the various speakers who were there. Many of them spoke eloquently about the assault on our freedoms, the direct assault by the power hungry. But I would draw your attention to, it's one thing to talk and sit up there and say, I need $93 trillion for the Green New Deal, when your bill collector has not yet come to the door and said, listen, wench, your student loans were due yesterday and America's debts are due tomorrow, and you can stop talking, shut your damn pie hole talking about the Green New Deal. There's not going to be a brown New Deal, a black New Deal, a white New Deal. There ain't going to be any other deal than paying us the damn money that you've already borrowed. and so we have this discussion, and I would encourage people to go and listen to as much of this conference as you can do. Is it only 6 hours in total, Jason?
No. Well, what I was just going to tell people is that it's available on a lot of different spots. People can watch it on Rumble. Search for CS The Truth on Rumble. And actually, on Rumble, I'm going to try to fix this later. I think there's a way that I can do that. But it was, we broke for lunch each day.
Right.
So if you go to like Crowdsource The Truth 5, on here, the first day's session was 5 hours and 41 minutes. And the second day was 6 hours and 43 minutes. People can also watch it on the Freedom Watch YouTube channel. And, of course, all the other places that Crowdsource The Truth hasn't been struck yet.
And so one of the things I was struck with was the degree to which Larry Klayman, as somebody I had never met until 2 days ago, was so highly regarded by so many different current and former clients.
Larry's great.
He's had a lot of experience, and I know because he has been engaged in controversial projects in the past. There's a lot of shade written in the internet against him, and I wasn't going to think one way or the other about him until I met him in person. But in person, I was very impressed with him, and I thought he and his team did a good job. I was very impressed with his young executive director who who has a compelling story to tell, and the breadth of his friendships and the backgrounds of the people there. It was not a white bread conference.
Right.
It was a conference of people drawn from many different backgrounds, a lot of working class people who understand and revere the objectives of the founders and the early history of this country.
He's calling me right now, but I'll have to talk to him later.
Yeah, sorry, Larry.
That's okay.
We're thinking of you.
Yeah.
But it was very, very well done, and I believe it's as they say in the Islamic world, inshallah, it's not going to be the last conference that there are. This is really just a first step to expose a bunch of views and then exchange those views and continue to move forward. It is not a call to violent revolution by any. It's the opposite of that. It was a very low-key, respectful discussion embracing, giving people. And indeed, there were speakers who contradicted other speakers, and it was not.
But that's how it should be, right?
Right.
Debate.
You've got to encourage that. I mean, the very same people who, we've said this before, but the very same people who in the 60s and 70s were saying, please listen to our discordant, dissenting views, are now saying there is no view other than the Pelosi view or the Dianne Feinstein view or the Chuck Schumer rat-catching view. And so a lot was said here. A lot of good stuff was said. I think a lot will be built on as a result of this conference. And I thank Larry and thank you for including me.
Well, thank you for being there, Charles. And, just to quickly, also, people can see there have been a lot of requests coming from the various presenters and from Freedom Watch itself to kind of separate out some of the speakers, because it is long. You're talking about 11 hours of total video content for people to go through. So the first segment that has been separated out is of Alan Keyes' really powerful speech.
Right.
I didn't know too much about Alan Keyes before this, but he's such an impressive guy. I mean, he ran for president in the past, and he's an incredible orator and really an inspirational guy in a number of ways. A little bit of a challenging lighting situation there with the backlight, but
he ran also against Barack Obama for Senate, and Barack Obama crushed him. Unfortunately, exactly. And I asked, why is he ambassador? And I don't know who played this cruel joke on him, but somebody said, all right, Ambassador Keyes, Alan Keyes, we'd like you to be ambassador to where, would you guess?
I don't know.
Zimbabwe.
Is that right?
Yes.
But maybe he wants to be that.
I don't think so. I mean, he did it, obviously, but so he must have wanted to. But Zimbabwe is really a godforsaken place.
Now, actually, Charles, you raise something that not that I ever do this, but to go totally in another direction.
You?
There's been a lot of kind of leaders of countries like Mugafali, or what's his name, from Tanzania, and then now this guy last night from Haiti. But I was talking to Cullen about this. These are countries that have had very low numbers of fatal outcomes from COVID-19, and then suddenly the leaders die, and also not a lot of uptake of vaccination in some of these places, and then those guys die, and miraculously the new guy is like, vaccinate everybody.
Yeah, I would say in Haiti, I believe the leader died from an outbreak of too many lead pellets.
No, that's what I mean. They're
sent at high speed
killing
through his
these guys.
Yeah, and actually on that, it's a good thing to bring up. Right away, somebody sent me an email saying, here's this article, interview about Haiti that, as it turns out, you did in 2016. So, because I spent a lot of time in 2016 pointing out the outrageousness of the Clintons going around and saying, give us credit for all our good works around the world.
Does that include assassinating this guy?
I doubt that he assassinated. But the thing that's really interesting is, as a result of this Clinton Foundation, as a result of this Haiti thing, could you pull up what's trending on Twitter? Do you know how to do that? I think if you just Google trending on Twitter.
I think you just go to Twitter, it has it there, doesn't it?
I'm just no expert on this. Yeah. It was...
There you go.
Let's see. Clinton Foundation was trending at some point today. I don't know if it's still is. I think
anytime anybody gets killed,
This is sports trending, I think.
Yeah, so I'm not a Twitter expert either, to tell you the truth, but
just
isn't it over here or something? Uh-oh. Spotify reportedly outraged by Joe Rogan. Topics to follow. I don't know. Twitter is a pile of crap. Do we want to talk about Donald Trump suing them?
We can, but...
we want to stick with this first. So
if
what is it that's trending on Twitter?
Well, you could try then put in Clinton Foundation and see if that shows.
Twitter trends, FAQ, hashtags and topics.
Trending on Twitter USA.
There you go. Topics today.
Just now.
Denmark.
Maybe somebody was making that up.
I don't know. Haiti.
Is Haiti trending? There you go, yeah. 471,000.
Tap that.
Yeah. You could try it.
Well, I don't know how this works. like I said, I'm not a Twitter expert, but
Excuse me.
I do check it frequently. You know, again, to go sideways, this operation has James Comey's fingerprints all over
Exactly.
it. FBI sees the Lego set.
I mean, this is absurd, frankly.
I agree.
You know, naked old guys arrested for public tryst.
That's less interesting.
Was that Ed Buck?
Right. Seizing Lego. James Comey's like, damn it, I don't have that Capitol.
I better put this stuff away.
Yeah. Get that Capitol building and make it back here. Toot sweet. Sorry, Charles.
That's
I just
okay.
totally took you
That's all right.
in
So
a sideways direction.
it's okay. So just going back then also to the Philadelphia Freedom thing, because one thing we were talking about down there is, and you put in there question mark Philadelphia Freedom.
Right.
This is a movie about HIV and AIDS.
True.
And
The Philadelphia movie.
right, and the real history. Again, I am not saying that HIV isn't a threat, and I'm not saying that AIDS isn't a threat at all. What I am saying is that the amount of money. This is the accountant in me, my great grandfather, on my father's side. The accountant in me says, all right, we've raised a tremendous amount of money, both at the Clinton Foundation, the Global Fund, governments, et cetera, ostensibly to fight HIV turning into AIDS. But we still have an AIDS problem. We still have an HIV problem. And there's never really been the kind of clinical, objective, follow the science, math-based analysis of what did we say the problem was with HIV and AIDS when it first came to the fore in 1981 or thereabouts. What do we believe the problem was? What did we then adjust our thinking to become? Originally, the problem was it's predominantly homosexual men and drug users.
Right.
And then under Fauci's aegis, it became, no, this could affect everybody.
Give it to everybody, right.
So that means if it could affect everybody, that means we've got to spend tons of money on this. And now we're going back to saying, it's predominantly homosexual men and drug users and people getting involved in places living in places in the world where there is not sanitation, not clean water, not electricity, and there's a prevalence in those type of countries of this problem still to this day. How much of the money was spent? How much of the prescriptions that were initially drugs that were prescribed and given to people with U.S. tax dollars, killed a lot of people.
AZT, right?
And we were told by Fauci, literally by Fauci and his people, this is the way to solve this problem. Take these drugs. Now it's like, you better not administer these drugs to people, you're going to kill them. And Fauci still sits on the 3-inch high pedestal where his...
He's way off the ground.
Right, way towering above the ground. Fauci is still on a pedestal, as is Deborah Birx, as are other people. And, I would argue that if we were to study and understand the problems that we have as a global society, the first problem we should begin to understand is Chicken Little syndrome. The people who scream the loudest about the sky is falling seem to be getting the most money, and then with that money and securing the fact that nobody's ever going to check and see where the money went, off they go, becoming the highest paid person in America, in the American government, and Fauci. We haven't yet put the microscope into the finances of the Fauci family and the Birx family and other people around this. And then we get into the brutal reality that I see just as an analyst, which is that when we come to understand the dark compromise that was made over HIV and AIDS.
Dark compromise?
The dark compromise was that Clinton and our magaziner went to these drug companies and basically said, listen, the generic drug companies. Ranbaxy in particular and others like it, you're not thinking clearly here. People are... That's
like a gaslighting statement, right?
No. This is recounted, reverentially about Bill Clinton. They would go. This brilliant guy, Bill Clinton, would go into a drug company and say, "You're not thinking clearly.
Oh,
if you price this medicine high, the people are going to die. Meaning they're not going to they're not going to need your medicine. If, on the other hand, you lower your prices...
Make it up on volume.
Well, you extend the life of your customers, which is true. When you put
You could really milk them.
Exactly,
He's
and
an
we'll pay
idiot.
for it. You know,
Bill Clinton's a jackass.
right? And you sit there and you say, like, this is not somebody who is a candidate for a Nobel. Well, maybe he is a candidate for a Nobel Prize. This
Yeah,
is,
right.
right.
He could have Robert David Steele type it up.
Right. But that argument, you think about that argument, which is memorialized in Elton John's book about HIV and AIDS, and many books recount the same parable, including, I think, Bill Clinton's own books, own words, that was the essential winning argument to these generic drug companies. We'll lower our prices, and in that way we will assure that these people might live not for an extra year, but for 25 years or 40 years, always dependent on this HIV
That's
medicine.
a terrible
Right. And
vulture strategy.
Well, I understand that, but even worse is that instead of going back then and saying, hey, this is the winning approach, we'll lower the prices to rock bottom prices, let you use generic medicines, and the but in the end, as it were, is that in the Western world, where the insurance systems can pay $20,000 a year for HIV drugs, we'll keep you hooked on branded drugs. We won't ask you to cut your prices in America.
That's
and in
crazy.
Western Europe and Japan and elsewhere. We'll let the branded drug companies keep their prices way up there. We'll let the taxpayer pay for these exorbitant prices. We won't allow we won't
Why
test.
taxpayers paying for it?
Well, we won't. Let's just finish one second. We won't test the generic drugs and make sure that they actually are efficacious and not killing people. What we'll do is we'll say, out in the developing world, where there is no health care, where there are no hospitals, no doctors, no nurses, no electricity, no roads, no way of getting to the patients, we'll have this fable that we've lowered the prices of drugs, and isn't that wonderful? Without saying, like, nobody can use them because there's
Right.
no way to keep the drugs properly refrigerated if they need to be refrigerated, or make sure
Even
that
have
they
a
are.
doctor check if this person needs it,
Or even, and then can't make sure that the person even has HIV and AIDS. We'll just say, look, there is this global fund and it's got a lot of money in it. And guess what, dictators around the world, if you want to scam a bunch of money out of the U.S. government and the global fund, we'll help you do that. But we take our slice, which who knows how much that is. So there's that stuff going on in the developing world. And here at home, the reason taxpayers are paying for it is that a lot of the of medical care is funded by tax revenues, right?
Really?
Yeah, sure. Medicaid and all that kind of stuff. You're taking it out of paychecks. You're borrowing. You're giving grants to the medical system. There's all kinds of subsidies, and it's tough to figure out. But in essence, in the West, we can afford these high prices, and then you really get into it. And you go, and no journalist. Perhaps I should do this, but I'm not a journalist. Nobody has gone and say, let's just for a second take a look at the speaking fees of Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton and ask ourselves how much of that money comes directly and indirectly from branded drug companies. How much have the branded drug companies been doing to pay off politicians like the Clintons, other politicians, other academics? How much of the political system is bought and paid for by Big Pharma?
The whole thing, it seems.
Right. How much advertising, for example, in legacy media comes from Big Pharma? I know watching Fox,
It's
just,
My Pillow and Cialis, and that's basically it.
yeah, and Peyronie's disease or whatever, and
Pierogi's disease. Charles, I wonder, now that we've been hearing so much about gain of function, I wonder if it would be possible to target some sort of deadly virus at retired FBI Lego collectors.
no, I wouldn't. We wouldn't want to do that. We want him to go to prison,
That's true.
right? And we want to say, I'm wearing these shoes. I like black.
Contract AIDS the old-fashioned way.
No, I don't wish that on him, though I think he's a horrible human being. But and I wanted to get a replacement for my previous pair of black loafers, and I went into the place where I buy my shoes. And
And they have these new
the
kinds.
with the white
Yeah,
soles, and,
yeah.
and I'm like, what? And I
That's
noticed
racist.
it's not racist.
White soles.
No, you're stepping on the white soles.
Oh, there you go.
That's
Even
right.
better.
It's payback.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of Philadelphia freedom with a question mark, we're sitting here and people are, I don't know what the current thing to watch tonight. I don't really watch the Stanley Cup too closely. I don't even know who won
we
it,
were watching that at the hotel.
but I don't know who won.
Yeah, well, it didn't end.
Yeah. I mean, it ended, but we
Well,
didn't
not
watch
while
it.
we were there.
Yeah. So I don't know where we are in playoffs, and I don't know what the next thing to do might be. We're in summer now, in theory on summer vacation. But for the longest time, progressives and conservatives have been locked in this vicious debate back and forth. Progressives are certain that conservatives are backward-looking reactionaries who don't know what they're talking about, and people on the conservative social wing are sure that progressives are all baby killers. And so we're just fighting. And meanwhile, the grifters are getting richer and richer in both parties. And we, the people, are getting in worse and worse shape. So what happened here? It looks like Montreal won.
How could somebody from Florida beat Canadians at hockey? That makes very little sense.
As a guest, there are quite a few Canadians and Russians on the Florida team.
That's probably right.
Just as a
like,
guest.
Screw this cold. But maybe it's got to do with, DeSantis' handling of COVID versus Trudeau.
A little inside baseball thing is just sort of, since you're on the subject of this, I sent my eldest child to this school called St. Bernard's, which is a pretty nice private school for boys only. And in his class was...
Wayne Gretzky's kid?
Well, we'll get to that. So it's tough to get into the school. So in his class, one of his closer friends was Nicky Nastasi, Ilya Nastasi's son. And so when William left St. Bernard's, that's when Wayne Gretzky's kid took William's place.
Isn't she like a model, the kid?
No. I don't know about Wayne. No, Wayne Gretzky has several children. He has a boy and a girl. Maybe Emma is a model.
The mother is like a supermodel.
Yeah, she's a model as well, yeah.
And I think, Paulina Gretzky, right. She's a model now. She had some crazy Instagram thing going on.
Yeah, but that's the mother of the child.
No. The mother is Sharon Jones or Janet Jones.
Paulina Gretzky?
This girl's like 20-something.
Really?
She's, yeah.
Okay, that's the sister.
32.
Yeah, that's the sister of the person who was in Williams' class.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Got to skate to where the puck is going, Charles.
I guess.
According to Wayne Gretzky.
That's true, probably.
It is true.
I'm not much of a... He's a great hockey player.
Yeah.
Anyway, so staying a little bit, we have some news on related fronts. But before we get to that, there's been a lot of stuff on Teneo.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
So if we could pull up the Google landing search page and look at that story I wrote on Teneo back in 2015. BC, yeah, this one.
That?
March 9th, 2015. Okay. And I this is from my site, but you hit that, you'll get the underlying Breitbart story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this only has 239 shares. It should have a lot more. Not because I wrote it, but just because it's 6 years ahead of the pack. That this is
hey,
a
look,
problem.
Bloomberg Philanthropies behind her.
Well, they were involved with the Clinton Foundation, heavily involved. So this is quite a long story. I called it out in March 9th, 2015. This is before she announced. And the story continues on Teneo. So we have first Doug Band resigned under mysterious circumstances after this large entity, this private equity firm CVC Capital, bought control of Teneo. First, Band resigns. Then Declan Kelly resigned. And Declan Kelly, I had forgotten that he was the guy who was pictured snoring at the Super Bowl. But he apparently got involved with some charity and decided it was a good idea to start chasing people around drunk at a charity. And first they booted him out of the charity, and then Teneo said, I think this...
What do you mean chasing them around drunk at a charity?
He got drunk and started...
Who was he chasing, though?
Women.
Oh.
I forget if it's board members or whatever. And so first they drum him out of the charity. The charity is another thing we can debate, and for another moment, because there's a lot of work. I think the charity is very suspicious, and I think it's likely it will not pass muster at all, but that's a side issue. Recently, they've just announced that Teneo will be taken over by the former head of Xerox, somebody called Ursula Burns.
There she is.
Yeah.
One day ago.
Yeah. So it's not clear to me that, maybe the Xerox track record under Ursula Burns is really strong. I'd be quite doubtful that that's the case, because Xerox is a company kind of like Polaroid, that at the top of each of their games, both companies were fantastic, world beaters, and then they kind of didn't move ahead of times, didn't retain their world leadership position. But this person is now head of Teneo. Now, Teneo is a very big company. It's got 1,200 people in it at this point, which is way bigger than Dillon Read was when I was there a long time ago. But its roots are as a PR firm, a public relations firm. Now, public relations is a profession that has many excellent people in it. I mean, it is not easy to take a product or service or issue and make sure that you get well covered in the press or even covered at all. So I'm not saying that PR people are rubes. I'm not looking down my nose at PR people. But there is a difference between the profession of trying to get good press and the profession of understanding what the underlying value of a company or security or asset is. They're very different things. Press, you can write, you get somebody who's a gifted writer, and they can make macaroni and cheese that's made with rancid cheese. They can sell that as as the next gourmet approach beyond macaroni and cheese. We make this with rancid macaroni and cheese, and it'll help you lose weight. You eat it, and you'll throw up 20 pounds worth of your body.
You could have a drink bar derived from poop.
Exactly. Oh yeah, the
Gates. The hot new restaurant.
Yeah, what vintage was this, Mr. Gates?
Bill Gates macaroni and cheese.
That's right.
Restaurant.
We're really going in the wrong direction here. But anyway, so Teneo has its origins in this company called FD. FD.
Oh, right.
Right? And so FD was purchased. Now, just to stop for a second here, to people who are not familiar with how the Securities and Exchange Commission works. If you're a publicly traded company in the United States, you have to make extensive filings that should be truthful, and they should be complete.
This is like a guide. It has to be obviously truthful, or it's...
Right, but there's my truth and your truth and the truth. So in theory, though, what you're supposed to do in a filing is you're supposed to make sure that any fact, the first issue is that any fact that is material must not be omitted. In other words, so just as the Clinton Foundation, we don't really know how much money went towards the Clinton Foundation, but they omit the part that was diverted from the books because the accountants find out about that, they're going to be upset. And we just say, well, here's the money we're prepared to say we got. Let's leave over here the $70 billion we diverted, or whatever the number is. And now we'll make, so the omission is very, very important. And then once you're dealing with the stuff that is not omitted, the so-called complete facts, those complete facts, all of which must be true. And not sort of true, like true.
The old adage, Charles, which is omit everything, admit nothing.
Exactly. That's not supposed to work for the SEC. So when you go back to that SEC filing, this is what's called an 8K/A. The A means amended. So a Form 8K is a form that is meant to describe material events. And this is a form that described, actually on Clarissa's birthday, which is October 3rd, the completion of the acquisition of this FD company. Notice that this is based in Baltimore, Maryland. Rod Rosenstein was U.S. attorney in this time. Laureate was about to become created the next year in this jurisdiction. But anyway, FTI Consulting purchased FD, right? And they discuss all the intricacies of that purchase. This FD had been owned by Advent International, which is a company set up by Advent International, which is a private equity firm, an American firm based at one point in Boston that did deals around the world and had a specialty of doing these deals, okay? So without going into great depth that we could do, there is a lot of information in this and other filings that explains the particulars of how this FD firm was purchased by FTI. Now, in my experience, acting as agent and also as principal, buying a company, if it's a company like a PR firm where the real assets of the firm walk out every day at closing, the people in the firm, if you're going to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for such a firm, you want to make sure that the key people
stick around
and don't steal your clients.
Right.
Right. And so the theory here, Declan Kelly was a key person at FD, as were some other people. And Declan Kelly had become involved, I don't know if it was by 2006 or before or after, he'd become friendly with the Clintons. Hillary Clinton in 2006 had to raise money for her re-election as Senate, and it was crucial that she do that and win because they were all set up to have her run for president. Her announcement, unlike in 2015, her announcement was January 20th, 2007. The election was in November of 2006. So they could, they're not stupid, the Clintons. They look ahead and they say, well, we got to get this locked. And most likely part of the sale, if we get into it, to FTI was you should buy this FD because the people around FD are really well plugged in with the Clintons and it won't hurt you. There's going to be a lot of work to do. You have the ear of Hillary Clinton, maybe the first female president of the United States.
Crack the glass ceiling.
And all that kind of stuff. And so the question is what Declan Kelly's position actually was back there in 2006, 7, 8, 9.
Horizontal.
And how noble was it, late at night, and how noble was it of him to say, you know what, out of the goodness of my heart, Hillary, what I think I'll do as an Irish person is I like to be America's representative to Northern Ireland. Go back through all this with the FBI, but wait, how do you do that when Robert Mueller's head of the FBI at this point? I mean, who's really going to look into all this? And what really happened with regard to FD? Well, fortunately we have, and I am picking on Doug Band, we have perhaps one of the dumbest lawyers ever to work in modern history. And he's made a lot of money off this Teneo.
Doug Band?
Doug Band. Let's reprise the infamous Doug Band memo.
Yeah, where do we get that?
Okay. The way to get it is to go into WikiLeaks Podesta and do, this is a clue for people who haven't figured this out. Let's search on Thatcher misspelled, T-H-A-T-C-H-E-R.
What's the search field here?
Yeah.
Sorry, say again?
T-H-A-T-C-H-E-R, which is not how you spell the last part of Simpson Thatcher. I say that as somebody who worked briefly at Simpson Thatcher as a proofreader. Now, there is a copy of the Band memo.
AJ66, is that?
That's Hillary.
It is.
I mean, that's Chelsea.
Chelsea, right.
Yeah, you can hit that one. This is where they say we're going to have a private and confidential oral debrief with the lead. This is the lead lawyer at Simpson Thatcher, Victoria Bjorklund.
Bill's definitely going to be there for that.
Right. Well, actually, he's having a cataract operation or something. It says in here. The doctor's appointment.
He doesn't need to see for an oral.
My father has cataract surgery the day before, and he really wants to pick me up. Anyway, so in my experience with lawyers, they can talk, most of them very well. But when they want to make a case to you about doing one thing or another, they like to write stuff down, in part because it takes time to type it up and they can charge for their time.
Well, they like it to be memorialized, I think.
Right, and it's generally, particularly as I age, I find that I like to have notes of what happened in a meeting and go back to, because, I've got a lot in my brain and I'm not necessarily going to remember it all properly. So, but when lawyers say that we want to have a confidential oral debrief, it typically is not because they're going to give you good news, right? They're saying to you, we want to, don't ask why this has to be confidential and oral.
So there's no record of it.
But yeah, so there's no record of it, because what we're about to tell you is like, you are in deep fucking shit. And we can't put that in any memo to you, because should this ultimately be subject either to a criminal proceeding or a civil proceeding, this will eventually be discovered, most likely, right? So suffice it to say...
Well, that's just it, discovery. They don't want these emails to come into discovery.
Right, and this is in... What's the date of this email? I think it's 2011.
Yeah.
Yeah, 11/20/2011. Okay, so just to put this in context, November 20th, 2011, assuming that November 15th fell on a business day, is 5 days after the final deadline for filing the 990 concerning 2010. No 2010 990 for any part of the Clinton Foundation was accurate. None was. None of the corrected ones are. It's all wrong. And Victoria Bjorklund has written the book in multiple editions now, a New York nonprofit corporation law. She can either say, look, I know my name is on the book as a co-author, and I've had umpty-ump major conferences where I've taken credit for my work in this area, but actually I didn't understand what was in the book that's under my name, and I don't know anything at all about this, and I'm an idiot. I mean, you could try that approach, but if you contrast what she writes in her book.
Oh, they've also misspelled her name, Charles.
They have, exactly. Well,
so that's a nice trick.
Now, who's this from? Chelsea, right? This is the world's diarrhea expert who is not an expert on spelling. And we've seen this with the American conservatives. Here you see Simpson Thatcher without the second T.
I don't think that's a mistake.
May not.
Because when the other thing is, a lot of times in lawsuits, they'll say, please send us all correspondence with this person. And you search your emails, and then you can say under oath, we did a search, and to the best of our whatever, here's the emails. Oh, whoops, we forgot all these ones where her name is misspelled.
A rotten apple doesn't fall far from the tree, which is exactly what Bill Clinton did, lying under oath.
Right.
And actually, he was disciplined for that twice. So anyway, if we go back into the Podesta WikiLeaks stuff, and mind you, in American Conservative Union, we also have a problem with multiple people
Spelling?
at the top who can't seem to spell. But nonetheless, let's make her vice chair of the Clinton Foundation, give her her own staff and office, let her fly private because she doesn't know how to spell. But
Get her
she's
a speak and spell.
But she's a PhD.
Yeah, right. That's what I mean. Yeah. That doesn't fly.
Right. Yeah, or it does fly. And it's attached, and we should more care about what the flies are buzzing around.
But I mean, I bet you Hunter Biden probably can't spell that well, other than crack and yellow. Other stuff he might have difficulty with.
But let's go and see if we can't find the Doug Band memo a different way. I thought we get it. There's multiple versions of it. If you put in Thatcher spelled properly, Thacher, and banned, and see what happens.
Does it work that way?
Yeah, separately banned.
Ah.
Government, here it is, that's it.
This?
Yep. And that's not it. Let's go back. There'll be one that will
With an
have...
attachment.
Yeah. Ray, this one here. No? Oh. Definitely was in there before, maybe further up. It's got to have a attachment.
Oh.
No, let's try just banned.
Banned on the run. Probably spells his name Banned.
And let's reorganize it so it comes oldest first. Yeah. Is that redone it? Is it redone? No. Okay, and let's see. Oldest first. Doesn't seem to be right. Because this is 15th, and here you go, 2008.
Yeah, I don't know.
Try it the other way, just in Google, Doug Band memo, and Doug Band is Zero Hedge memo or something. It's definitely up there.
Hacked.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's not hacked, is it?
No.
That's CNBC saying it's hacked.
Wait, further up here.
Up?
Document released by WikiLeaks. There you go. Okay.
There we go.
Attachments. And this is the final version. Okay, you see, notice it says final docx. We'll be able to find another Sleuths will be able to find an earlier version. But if that comes up.
Oh, here it is.
Okay, this is a memo which for some reason they say is to Victoria Bjorklund, and they say it's misspelled.
Oh no, here it doesn't.
But that's misspelled, and that's misspelled. And how come this didn't come? All right. So this is to those people with a copy to, and no, this is just priceless. President Bill Clinton, Clinton Foundation founder. And as they say, no, he didn't. He didn't. He didn't found the Clinton Foundation. Unless if he did, then you got to go back to 97, 98, 99, 2000, and everyone afterwards and put him in as a key employee. Because if he founded it, he's definitely a key employee. And whether she, in fact, was Chelsea Clinton a board member by November 16th, 2011 is a big question. I'm not certain she was. But anyway, in June 2009, DK Consulting was founded by Declan Kelly. Okay? He served as chief operating officer of FTI Consulting until June 2009. Okay? And that's interesting. I didn't notice this before. 2 different types. This is blue type here.
Well, this is, I'm not looking at it in Microsoft Word, so there could be formatting strangeness.
Okay. But anyway, DK was founded by Declan Kelly in June 2009. He had been COO of FTI Consulting. So query, how do you found this new consulting company and you go into work as a special envoy, resign. In June 2011, Mr. Kelly and I founded Teneo Strategies.
Similar name.
Right. And so you see this tortured thing, and this is not the whole memo. This is the revised memo. There are important pieces that are left out for final consumption, which I think are even more incriminating. But they talk about leveraging Teneo for the foundation, and they talk about the Clinton Global Initiative, which didn't exist.
Oh.
There's your 33.
Well, why would they give that amount? Why not just $4 million or $4,500,000?
I don't know. And it's interesting. Now that you pointed out, Jason, there's not a 33 in here. 330. Maybe there is a 330. Let's see. 330, 250. Yeah, there is 330. Okay. Okay. Mr. Kelly cultivated Mr. Kent, Mokhtar's Kent, interest in the foundation, first in CGI and the foundation. Anyway, this recounts numerous examples of what I would call inurement, involving multiple entities which really didn't legally exist, sending money back and forth. Here we have UBS giving money to Katrina in 2005. How they
Union
did that.
Bank of Switzerland.
Certainly. Anyway.
Here's the American Island Fund.
Right, and I don't know that Xerox is in here. Mr. Kelly brought Joan Walker, his long-to-meet President Clinton, at his home in Chappaqua. Teneo gave money. And here we have tenor clients. That must be something different. Oh, that's Teneo. That's like totally.
No, it's Pavarotti.
GEMS is this thing that's also paying Bill Clinton personally.
Rockefeller Foundation.
Of course. Interesting, these numbers don't jive with the Rockefeller Foundation filings. I've looked at them. I don't see I'll have to go back and look at them, but keep going. Laureate, we know about that. Laureate's paying Bill and Hillary starting in 2010, a total of $17.6 billion. And this guy's band is supposed to be a lawyer.
There's a lot of lawyers who are kind of stupid.
And here we are, the for-profit activity of President Clinton, i.e. Bill Clinton, Inc. It's like, I would like to send a memo to one of the most powerful law firms in the world, making sure that I copy all of these very powerful people who have legal liability. I'm a lawyer, by the way, and admitting that this is a criminal enterprise. Just in case you were wondering, we could have called it the criminal activities of Bill Clinton, Limited or Inc. or whatever. But let's just admit that there was more than $50 million in for-profit activity that Bill Clinton derived through the operation of these various, in quote, charities. It's mind-numbing to me that somebody would be this stupid. And here you have $30 million for him personally, and what do you see over there, Jason? With 66 divided by 2.
Over the next 9 years.
Divided by 2 is...
Yes, I know.
What? No, you got it.
Well, I was just distracted momentarily here by Scott is telling us that the Rockefeller Foundation was one of America's first foundations.
No, I know that, yeah.
But maybe they're the ones who came up with this template for how to do fraud with a foundation.
Well, another one. Well, yeah, absolutely. So this contest, we talked about power-hungry people, monopolists, Rockefeller,
yeah,
and monopolist Gates,
right,
and monopolist Bloomberg, and other monopolists.
What about Warren Buffett?
I don't know that he's down with monopolists. I don't think he owns any monopolies, but I could be wrong. anyway, this memo is the kind of thing that if I were going to try to teach a law school class, which I'm not competent to do, or teach a class on how not to run a charity, I'd say, let's start with this. What are your views about this memo? Is on a scale of where 1 is horrible and 9 is fantastic, where does this fit? And I would say negative Google. I mean, it's off the charts. You should.
You talking about comedy value or
no? It's
factual?
Just you're a lawyer and you're a member of the bar and you're operating this Teneo and you're doing all this other stuff and you've got political aspirations and you're writing this kind of a memo and you're like, put me in, coach, put me in. I'm part of Teneo. I'm part of this. Teneo is a fantastic firm. Look at the quality of the work we do. It's fantastic. That's why you should pay me a gigantic retainer.
They should put that Declan Kelly sleep at the Super Bowl in the annual report.
I know. With the soundtrack.
Draw a mustache on him with a Sharpie.
With the soundtrack. It would be very good. Yeah. So let's go for, excuse me for using the S word, but for shits and giggles, let's go into the New York entity search, New York State entity search. And I'm mindful of the time. So you tell me what our time limit is here.
Oh, well,
But let's punch in Teneo and see what comes up.
In this?
Yeah. They've improved this.
Yeah, it looks different. So Letitia
Entity
James.
type. It's got to be here. Corporation.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Teneo. Before we go into this, let's see. Do they have dates here? All right. Domestic. Yeah. Date of first filing. Okay, the thing in Queens, the king and queen of Queens is not it. Here we have one, a Teneo, Inc. Okay, notice over here, it's a domestic not-for-profit corporation.
Wait a minute, I thought it was an investment thing.
I understand, you'll see. And here, November 18th, 2008. Now, why is that an interesting date, Jason?
November 2008, because Hillary Clinton was running for Senate.
Well, can you minimize this and do another Google search?
Yeah.
MOU, Clinton Foundation. State, let's see. Keep going. Here it is. Okay, let's look at the date of this.
Oh, yeah, this is the thing. Well, you mean this date or the one where they have forged it?
Let's look down the signature page and see what it says.
That's the real one.
11/16.
Right.
They formed Teneo 2 days later.
Why'd they do that?
Well, because Doug
And
Vance
then why'd
said,
they change this to 12-something later?
well, because
To make it after Teneo.
no. I think it is, and this is one of these classic things. We talked a little bit about it at the conference down in Philadelphia, but I remember, and I won't identify the CEO, but I was working on back in 1990 in a multi-billion-dollar transaction, which was big in 1990, with the CEO of this large publicly traded company, and he was saying, listen, I'm a lawyer, let me tell you some of the tricks that we used to do. And he said, one of the tricks we used to do is we used to have this elaborate definition section in the front of a contract. We defined Jason.
So you wouldn't read
Crowdsource. It. No. Crowdsource the truth too is in parens CS2.
Yeah.
Or something
Whatever,
else.
yeah.
Is this and that and blah and all like 20 pages of that, and then you just don't use any of those definitions in the contract. The whole contract is meaningless. It was one of the tricks that he was saying. People, well, we're not going to do that. But the most interesting thing for me of all this is on and on and on about the Clinton Foundation will do this and the Clinton Foundation will not do that. What did the Clinton Foundation do in Hong Kong on December 1st and 2nd?
Of what? They had their meeting.
So this thing is signed on 11/16/2008 and explicitly does not mention anything to do with a conference that took place after Hillary was nominated to be Secretary of State. You don't think that people in Asia, the 400 people who attended the conference in December of 2008 in Hong Kong, weren't very thirsty to find out what the Obama administration was going to do with their Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton? You don't think they were talking to Bill saying, listen.
Probably people from China there.
Right. They were in China, but beyond that, remember, this is when Trump is, between the time he's elected and he's inaugurated, the entire scandal industry against Trump was Donald Trump's people were talking to the Russians.
Oh, right.
Right. And possibly, engaging in foreign policy discussions about, here we have Bill Clinton and his team are on site in China hosting this gigantic conference.
Selling nuclear missiles.
Whatever. And they say, well, we better not have in the final version of the MOU, we maybe want to just say this thing happened on December 12th. So they have this signed on the 11th at the end. How do you sign something that quickly? Valerie Jarrett had only been co-chair of this transition team for a day or so. Okay. And if you actually go back up to the top.
Well, there's just one more thing I want to point out to you about this, Charles, and I think we discussed this previously, but I detect a distinct difference in quality with this type and the signature and the word Jarrett, which stands out as if this is they have some expert in there who's good at making PDF documents.
Yeah, these things are imported and stuff like that. The Valerie Jarrett looks to me like it's imported into there, the image. Not that Obama Presidential Transition Foundation in bold, and William J. Clinton Foundation. First of all, William J. Clinton Foundation didn't exist on that date, right? It didn't have, I think we've been through this before, it didn't have bylaws, it hadn't changed its name properly. None of these entities actually exist they're talking about. But if you go to
wait a minute. See, this is, you got the holes like it's from a binder.
Yeah.
So this, if it were legitimate, is a document that was printed and signed on a piece of paper, clipped into a binder, and then scanned to get it in here. So how does this thing have all these furry little JPEG artifacts around it while this type is all sharp? And, and actually what I would tell you is this looks to me like a junked up document that has had the levels compressed to increase the contrast around here. This is a forged document for sure.
Right, well,
I think.
Okay, well, let's go to the first page of it. And you look here and you see this agreement is dated, between...
Oh, right. So wait a minute.
Right.
So how is it signed before the date of the thing?
Right. Time travel is possible, Jason.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah, all my analysis of the image, they just have the wrong date on it. Wait, now it's jammed up. It won't let me move around the document. That's interesting, isn't it?
Can you move it by doing this?
Yeah. Let's just try this. Wow. What is going on here?
Maybe go back and bring it back.
The Lords of PDF.
And this is December 3, 2013 production.
There it is.
Yeah. But anyway, look here. This says it's between the William J. Clinton Foundation, right? And the Office of the President-elect, a 501c4 entity, which we've shown before, ceased existing afterwards. So if you have an agreement between these two entities, which is a memorandum of understanding, it's not a binding legal agreement, it has no force and effect, and this entity doesn't exist at all, really, and this one is not the name of what they say in the top. They don't refer to it as the Obama Presidential Transition Foundation. There is no such thing.
No foundation.
Right.
And here you have blatant. That escaped me at first, Charles. So the document's created on December 8th. Oh, so it's forward dated, and she signed. And then they realized, whoops, you better make that 1 into a 2.
Right.
So the document doesn't have a blatant and obvious error in it.
And I forget where we see the other version. You remember? It's.
I don't remember. No, but you told me about it.
No, we've seen it before.
We have seen it for sure. Oh, it must have been in the Clinton Foundation website.
Yeah, it might be in the Clinton Foundation website.
How do I find it? Just go Clinton Foundation?
Yeah. With a space, and just let's try.
You're going to ask us for money.
Of course. The Clinton Family Self-Enrichment Initiative.
So where is this stuff?
What's the address of the place?
1633.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, that's that building where the Mars restaurant used to be.
Right. I think if you just Google Clinton Foundation MOU again, you'll get to and maybe John Kerry, misspelled. Yeah, that. Let's see if this one has the. No.
We are actually running up against.
Time deadline, okay.
And I only raised that point, Charles, because there's 2 other shows happening tonight.
That's fine, okay.
We've got On the Trail of Son of Sam with Manny Grossman, and also High Dive with Lee Stranahan happening later tonight, because this was such an intense setup and execution for the Third Continental Congress. It's kind of amazing that I'm still standing.
Do we have
Yes.
two minutes? Just because there's
Absolutely,
one
Charles.
other thing I just want to cover. If we go into Gates Foundation and Zero, or just Zero Hedge.
I meant to ask you about that they said that Bill Gates is going to buy
Right. And you should see my tweet on the subject.
her shit. How can you buy
Oh, boy.
someone's
Assassins disguised as DEA agents killed Gates.
disguised? How do we know they're disguised?
But
Not just dressed.
so China just banned its tallest skyscrapers. You guys can't exist.
And they show you the guy getting... We're not going to do that right now. That sounds likely to get banned from...
But keep on going down to the Gates story.
Because it said that he was going to
wait.
buy out her shares.
Yeah, I know.
Can you do that?
No, we're going to talk about
That's what I mean. How are there shares in a foundation?
Did you skip over it already, or did
Why don't we just say Zero Hedge?
Gates Foundation? Because they might have pulled it down already. Yeah, there we go.
Buy out. I didn't
Now,
realize you could do that.
I've already tweeted this out, and with my comment on this is rubbish. Now, first of all, what this likely means to me, individuals don't own foundations.
That's what I mean.
Right. So that's but if what could be going on here, and this is something, note to Melinda French Gates and your lawyers. No agreement that you're going to enter into with Bill Gates is going to protect you, insulate you
From the stuff you've already done?
from the stuff you've already done, and from the states and the federal and the foreign governments are going to go after the Gates Foundation, as they should, while you were a trustee, right? You can do a deal with Bill that says, to the extent there are civil penalties and fines and interest assessed against the Gates Foundation, and to the extent that those the authorities come against the trustees, you will reimburse me for the cost of this. But you can't insulate her, I don't think, from criminal liability by any civil contract. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but that's the way I understand it. And interesting that this story would come out the way it has come out. So we have new focus on what happened in Haiti, unwillingness to go in and understand how much money was diverted out of Haiti. Even to this day, it's more than 10 years after the event. We still don't know how much money was stolen by Haiti and from Haiti and who did it. We now have, where we started on this project, you and I, Jason, Bill Gates was still on a pedestal along with the garden gnome, Fauci, and today neither. I mean, it's tough to say who's further underground, Gates or Fauci. In addition, beyond, and I'll close with this one thing, there's another story on...
he's got the UN Agenda 2030 pin on, Charles.
Yeah, that'll do well in prison. Maybe you can get a few bucks for that. If you go into EcoHealth Alliance, this, I don't take any credit for noticing this. It's just, I did, and we did early. There's a Zero Hedge story on that as well. And not that... Last 24. You just do search results on the right, or no more.
Tools.
Yeah, tools. Anytime past 24 hours. Yeah, that.
Starts with 2 lives.
This story just shreds this Peter Daszak, shreds him. And again, I mean, I don't know the guy personally. I don't want to know the guy personally, but I'll just say, this EcoHealth Alliance was supposed to be a wildlife preserve taking care of animals threatened with extinction. Not humans. I know humans arguably are animals, but animals threatened with extinction. That's what it was supposed to do. This dude is trained as a zoologist. What the hell is he doing seeking grants to study gain-of-function research, i.e. how to take a virus and make it
Do something it doesn't normally do.
against humans?
Well, I think it's just anything that it
Right.
gains a
But in this
capability.
case, they were trying to,
Yeah.
what, and why is he, why would you say, oh, I'll get together with a bat lady and drink some of this red wine or whatever that is.
The thing that David Hawkins has spoken about with regard to this gain of function is the use, this is serious. By using artificial intelligence to drive your gain of function research, you can do things with wide numbers of samples that happen so much more rapidly than you could do as scientists doing, they could say okay, we want a virus that's going to attack old people or just this race.
But honest, call me stupid, which people can. But you and I were just in Philadelphia. We drove back.
Yep.
Did you see any potholes? Did you see any urban
it was
blight?
a disaster.
Did you see anything wrong in Philadelphia? I mean,
urban blight, I think you call it.
I mean, this is one of the most.
Did I see anything right in Philadelphia outside the room that we were in?
Right. So I mean, here we have a country, and Philadelphia has a horribly dilapidated inner city, and it's got these historical monuments that are important. Here we have a city that's falling down, and America is routing money. Different arms of the government are routing money through a charity that doesn't exist, run by a guy who's not qualified to do the work, doing gain of function research instead of filling in the potholes in Philadelphia. It's not complicated. Forget the gain of function, fill the potholes. Once you have that done, maybe we'll let you gain some function. Maybe.
You think that the highway could gain the function of being able to drive on it.
Right. So with that, great art department.
Thank you, Charles. It was another excellent show. I think people are enjoying the mixing it up. By the way, the reason that we weren't outside today is that it's 95 degrees.
Isn't it 195?
I don't know if it's 195, but it was very, very hot. And I don't mind so much as it just stops the phone from working because it overheats so much. But I think this was an excellent review of information. For people who haven't had a chance to see the Third Continental Congress, it's available on Crowdsource The Truth 5. It's available. I've created a new Citizens Grand Jury channel because I'm trying to have all these co-host channels to help avoid the multiple strikes that keep taking out channels. People can also watch it on Rumble. People can, of course, become sponsors on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth.
And Freedom Watch.
And Freedom Watch. People should go to freedomwatchusa.org. Sponsor Larry and his team at Freedom Watch. These kinds of things can't happen without the support and sponsorship of viewers. So please do that. And thanks for watching, everybody. I'm going to be back in just a little while. And what is that? Stupid comment. Tune in tonight at 7 p.m. I'm going to be on the trail of Son of Sam with Manny Grossman. And, Charles, there's some people who are super into this guy, Maury Terry, and don't like me questioning his research. But I found yet another very questionable set of claims in the book. And my unique knowledge in areas that people can guess what my unique knowledge is in are, I think, going to raise some questions about this particular claim in the Maury Terry book. So we'll be back with Manny later, and then Lee Stranahan, super late show tonight. It's a triple header. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you soon.